So hello everyone. It's still morning, so good morning everyone, and welcome to our discussion today, where we'll be looking at the very clear paradigm shift in the narrative and hence also the policies that will be guiding the European Union's development cooperation and its relationship with the Global South in the coming years, the next 5 years at least. And we'll also try and understand the role for local authorities and regional governments in the future of development cooperation. I know, and we've seen that you're all very interested in the subject and are very active players in it, or at least want to be. And we'll also see how different European political parties are going to be dealing with this very important and essential topic in the next 5 years, over the next 5 years. The interpretation, once again, we have English, Spanish, and the hashtag to use, I think you have it on the screens here, is hashtag CEMR Leaders Summit and hashtag Future of Europe. So let me first introduce the discussants who will be here. Let me also emphasize that all of you are here. We're a rather small number, so it's good to be interactive. So do not hesitate to come in and comment and ask questions when I give you the floor. Delighted, of course, to have with us Boris Tonhauser. No need to introduce you, Boris, Director of Platforma. Also with us, Mary-Alex Verhoeven, Advisor on Food and Safety and Quality at the Green Group, Green EFA Group in the European Parliament. Justina Witkowskaiter, Policy Advisor for the DEF Committee in the European Parliament, Renew Group. Silvia Gonzalez del Pino, Political Advisor for the DEF Committee from the Socialists and Democrats, the S&D Group. And last but not least, Renske Steenbergen, who is the Deputy Director of VNG International. Now, as for the first panel discussion, I've been very kindly asked by the organizers to sort of set the scene for you, just to give you a bit of background on myself. I'm based in Brussels, travel around the world. I've sort of specialized in the EU's foreign and security policy, trade policy, development policy over almost 3 decades, soon to be 30 decades. And I'm... Inshallah. Yes. And I've been watching the EU in its interactions, as I said, for some time. I also write about it and teach the College of Europe. So what I always say is today, if you look at our world, it is transforming very rapidly. I used to say it's in transition, but I think the transition has already happened, and history is really, really speeding up. Just a few points. First, the multi-lateral order that was crafted by the victors of the Second World War is undergoing, as we all see, daily massive structural shifts. And second, as that happens, we are faced with a much more complex, complicated, and unpredictable multipolar world. Now, these are some things that are very evident to all of us, but I can assure you here in the European bubble here, the EU bubble, some of these points sometimes are difficult to digest. And in this new multipolar world, we have to work with African, Asian, Latin American, Middle Eastern states, often referred to by myself and many others as the Global South. And these countries have, as we can see, increased power, role, and agency. They're not part of any formal alliances. They operate in what I call a mix and match world. Some people call it an a la carte world. And they make friends and coalitions on the basis of their national concerns and priorities. Now, these changes have very, very important implications for the European Union and for its development policy. So let me just share with you some of what I call the inconvenient truths about the changed world that some of us here in Brussels tend to avoid. So let's be very frank. The gap between the EU and the Global South has widened rapidly and dangerously because of deep-rooted differences over trade, debt relief, climate change, health, and the reform of multilateralism. These differences have become wider and deeper in the last few years due to critical questions linked to the access to vaccines following the COVID-19 pandemic and the damaging economic fallout from Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. Most importantly, and if you read my articles, you will see that I emphasize this very much, the EU's collective failure to uphold international law in Gaza as it is devastated following Israel's the terror attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th, the response has prompted accusations of double standards from the global south. And this is, I think, very, very apparent every time we look at a headline. We saw it just recently at the G7, and the fact that some countries did not attend the peace conference, Ukraine peace conference in Switzerland. And sometimes we overlook this fact here in Brussels, but I believe very much that the Black Lives Matter movement that brought to the fore questions to do with Europe's colonial legacy, its engagement in the trade of enslaved people, and enduring systemic racism, which is mainstreamed in some of our EU policies, including approaches to migration and also development aid. And let's not forget, and we talked about it this morning, that these major systemic transformations are taking place as far-right, hard-right, extreme-right parties increase their number, role, and influence across Europe. In the European Parliament, we heard it this morning, centrists are still in a majority, but the far right, let's not fool ourselves, has made major gains, and this will have, of course it will have, major repercussions for EU development policy. Around us, geopolitically, there is a dangerous rivalry between the United States and China, and we are confronted with a nightmarish prospect of another confrontational Donald Trump presidency. So I believe that EU policymakers and the newcomers, the parliamentarians, will have to struggle to respond to this changed environment. And you may all have seen new ideas are being developed by the European Commission, and these ideas reflect a new, more pragmatic, that's a nice way of putting it, paradigm. So you and I, many of us were brought up on an EU that focused on fragility and values. And now, if you read that document and if you listen to some of our politicians, the EU is putting its emphasis on pushing back against rivals through geo-economic strategies such as this much publicized global gateway. The focus is on investing in large-scale infrastructure projects. It's also on the so-called necessity to win the battle of offers, to defend our economic interests, and to expand our access to critical raw materials, which our industries really need. Also, to keep in mind, efforts are underway to re-centralize the EU's financial instruments for financing external action, and there is a focus on Team Europe approach, including on migration. So together, I think these changes mean that EU development policy today stands at a crossroads. I think some of us, have many unanswered questions. My questions are, will EU actions in the Global South still uphold the central values of the European Union, democracy, human rights, and rule of law, and ensure also that no one and no place is left behind? Will these policies and actions be driven by transactional and mercantile principles? Will the EU find a balance between value-based cooperation and our economic interests? Local authorities and regional authorities have been playing an essential role as unique development implementers through decentralized cooperation and city-to-city, region-to-region, and triangular partnerships. Will they have this role? Will you have this role in the future of development cooperation? So my aim here is to set the scene, to start with some thought-provoking points. And so let's start the conversation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your views. And of course, I'm going to turn now to Boris to give me his views on what we face ahead in these rather challenging times.
Thank you very much, Shada, for this excellent introduction and framing on where we are today and what is going on in the world around us. Now, let's look from all these challenges from this ever-changing and a la carte world towards what is the role of local regional governments and where we stand all together. And looking back a little bit, we can see that the recognition on the role of local regional governments and cities and regions in European development policy has been quite a long journey, and its legitimacy and inclusion and financial autonomy has ebbed and flowed over the years a little bit. Formally in 2008, but present over the last 30 years, local authorities, in the speak of the EU, have been playing an essential role as the unique implementers of development policies, of the priorities, the SDGs after 2015, through decentralized cooperation, city to city, region to region, and triangular partnerships. 2008 was also the year where PLATFORMA came to existence, as local regional governments saw the need to be organized, to speak with one voice to the actors at the EU level in Brussels. Then, after a few years of lobbying and concentrated efforts and dialogue, this support by the EU in 2013 was reiterated through the Commission communication. That was quite a breakthrough for us, where the Commission declared the need to empower local authorities in partner countries, but also in 2015 the establishment of the first framework partnership agreements between DG DEFCO at that time, today DG INPA, and global associations of local and regional authorities, and all of them are represented here today, so you know what we speak about. Our close partners, our close colleagues who also have a framework partnership agreement with the European Commission. In the current multi-annual financial framework, we have a new instrument, NDICI, Global Europe, where still local and regional governments are highlighted as playing a key and essential role in the implementation of development policy, conforming this through political but also financial commitment. So thanks to these processes, we are also able to work together as a coalition on decentralized cooperation. The bad news coming with NDICI Global Europe is that we lost a thematic budget line. We had the previously thematic budget line, civil society organizations and local authorities. This budget line has not been renewed under the current instrument, but they still have provisions in the NDICI Global Europe recognizing local authorities as instruments, local as important beneficiaries and catalyzers of development. Substantially, support for the empowerment of local regional governments in partner countries, support to decentralization and local governance is defined through a budget allocation of a minimum or at least 500 million euros in this programming period. It is enclosed under the geographic programs, so divided among the geographic priority areas of the EU, and channeled by the EU delegations, who receive this new role to be the ones to make things happen at the local level in the partner countries through national as well as regional multi-annual indicative programs, MIPs. Coming to this, we have new initiatives appearing at the EU, obviously the Team Europe initiatives and the Team Europe approach, which is also a novelty, including the Global Gateway, so two complementary approaches, Team Europe and Global Gateway, which in theory further opened avenues for collaboration with local authorities and are relevant for their activities, but they remain heavily focused on collaboration with and between EU member states and financial institutions, such as the European Investment Bank or European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So, PLATFORMA, we are on the table in these instruments. We are trying to be part of the dialogue with the stakeholders and the EU institutions. PLATFORMA is represented as a co-chair in the Global Gateway CSOLA, so civil society organization, local authorities platform, but also actively participating in the Team Europe initiatives on democracy alongside other local authorities. So, in this context, while NDICI had provided some opportunities to mainstream local governments into the EU programming in many countries, to date, its rollout has resulted in limited dialogue, as we see at the local level in partner countries with local governments and their partners, city to city, region to region, town to town partnerships that we have. The point in country, there's always difficult realities in each of the partner country. Technical and human resources capacities of the EU delegations, sometimes it's organizational culture in the EU delegations, sometimes it's stringent eligibility requirements, administrative requirements for EU funding. Of course, on the other side of the beneficiaries is lack of the capacities to absorb funding, even if it's available. And also in the development, it's a big, let's say, in the quote marks, tradition to work with international NGOs, with civil society organizations. There is not a big tradition of development actors, development parties to come and work with local governments, with local government associations. So especially national development agencies who now bring or implement a bulk of international cooperation or official development assistance, they all add, all these factors add to the complexity on finding a space around the table and a space for local regional governments to engage with EU delegations, to engage and implement projects or receive direct funding, which is also one of the possible modalities at the local level. This means that we have these geopolitical, geo-economic strategies being put forward by the EU, such as the Global Gateway. We have the re-centralization of its instruments dedicated to financing of external actions, alongside of the resurgence of member states' direct financing role in development. So under this new Team Europe approach, which highlights the role of member states, of national governments, we hear new narratives, and especially recently you might have heard or read our news about the leaked briefing book for the future Commission and for the future Council, where we see a clear idea of shifting development policy from the way the EU has cooperated in the past, from development cooperation based on values, based on solidarity, based on partnerships. We see a clear trend shifting towards securing geopolitical security, raw material security, and economic partnerships around the world for the EU. So currently, at the midpoint of the multi-annual financial framework, we are undergoing the evaluation of the external instruments, and well, presented mostly in positive terms. The partial results of the midterm evaluations has indicated that NDC has brought more coherence, more complementarity between external instruments, but it also shows that EU has become innovative, has become flexible and collaborative partner around the world with this new instrument. This is certainly a positive step forward. However, there is still scope for greater simplification of programming. This is something that everybody keeps reminding the EU about, simplification of programming. The objective setting process is not always transparent and always very clear. It is positive that we can reinforce coherence and effective collaboration between different stakeholders and partners, such as local authorities, who have a natural relationship to work with local actors, local stakeholders, civil society organizations, businesses, etc. So coming back to the situation in partner countries, a structured dialogue with EU delegations on the ground remains highly heterogeneous. There are many countries where the dialogue is ongoing, many countries where the frequency, representativity, methodology across different partner countries are often at the discretion of the EU delegations, but also reflect the capacity of the EU delegations to actually undergo these processes, engage with the partners and engage with the stakeholders on the ground. So this is a great challenge for us, for cities, for regions, to be able to work hand in hand with EU delegations in partner countries, to support and align with EU development policy, obviously, but also in the end to maybe receive support and funding from the EU budget and instruments that is present there, that is earmarked in the NDC documents. Yet we'll still have to see how this funding is practically made available for concrete city-to-city, region-to-region cooperation projects, for strengthening local governance, for strengthening decentralization, strengthening key actors such as national associations of local regional governments in partner countries as well. So this is the challenge which is intrinsic to the mechanism. To this we can add the volatile context that we have around the world. We have risks to democracy in many countries. We have setbacks in decentralization. We have increasingly volatile context. We have military regimes taking over in several countries. So this fragile environment, fragile context, basically protracts through crises such as Ukraine, where, for example, we see the reallocation of the Commission's budget towards the Ukraine facility will see substantial funds being redirected for these purposes. In addition, at member state level as well, we see countries such as Finland, France, Germany, we see Netherlands and others announcing substantial cuts in development policies, in national budgets. That means more constraints during the next financing periods. In parallel, we have seen in prominence in the recent years also international actors at the UN level, at the OECD level, calling for localization of development, calling for localization of global policies from top-down approach to decentralized approach driven by local localities and local needs. So under the next financing period that we expect, it is crucial that we encourage member states to maintain their commitments towards development, and that is how we can also support national associations in Europe in dialogue with their national governments to keep up their commitments, recognize that development should be keyed towards poverty and inequality reduction, as it's supposed to be. It can be a stronger asset and highly complementary towards what we see emerging as a purely trade-based and economic-driven agendas. So the balance between security that we need in terms of geopolitics, security we need in terms of economics, security that we need in terms of demographics, security that we need in terms of raw materials, so that we can make the green transition and attack climate change. This security, we still believe, should be balanced by a values-based approach, so that we can really uphold, as you said, the basic values of the EU, democracy, rule of law, but I would also recall subsidiarity among these values. And human rights, of course, human rights. Thank you very much. Absolutely, the triad that we have in the EU. So ultimately, for us, it will be essential to ensure that decentralized cooperation as a modality remains. It is streamlined and understood as an effective tool, as a part of an approach to development cooperation, which is able to bring the EU closer to citizens, not only at home, but also in partner countries. And supporting the traditional city diplomacy or internationalization of cities, of regions, will be quite important also in the future. Especially in these volatile times, we have fragile states, complicated context. Dialogue between national governments and partner countries is increasingly complex in some countries. We see that national political dialogue at home is turning inwards in many countries. So it is crucial for us to pass the message that local authorities, local governments can be seen as strategic partners in this context, in this framework, strategic partners to the EU, and that local regional governments continue to operate where traditional development actors not always are able to. So as Platforma, we are following these developments very closely, and we will be reaching out to the EU Parliament once the committees are in place, once the EU parliamentarians are settled down in Brussels. And we also reach out to other institutional partners to push for this recognition, further recognition and mainstreaming of decentralized cooperation, and assure that it also can be used as an effective tool to secure our position as Europe, to secure our partnerships in the future, to secure that we achieve the 2030 agenda, to secure that we achieve the climate goals, which, as we have seen in the poll just right in the morning, is one of the highest priorities, and we see this all around the world. And obviously, we must not leave anyone behind in this process, and supporting the strategic ambitions that the EU has around the world. So this is maybe the introduction of what we as Platforma can do, the role that we can play in this context, and we'll be happy to engage with the newly elected members of the European Parliament. We'll be happy to engage if we have a new commissioner. Maybe we will have the same commissioner also in the future. Everything is in the books right now. We don't know. So we are steadfastly committed to maintain the dialogue at the EU level with your support so that we can make sure that these policies are streamlined all along from the EU through member states, including with the support of international development agencies, national development agencies, but also the inevitable role of cities and regions at the local level who want to be more international, who want to do their diplomacy, who want to set their foot in the world and develop partnerships with their peers in partner countries.
Thank you. Boris, thank you very much for outlining the challenges we face. It says also, once again, a rather sobering but realistic view of what we face in terms of budgets being slashed, especially for development, possibly also for climate, which, as we saw this morning, is top of the agenda for most of our citizens and local authorities, and to pointing out how Global Gateway and Team Europe, while interesting initiatives and geopolitically, I guess, quite interesting and significant, also challenge some of our basic premises of development assistance and our focus on solidarity. And I'm very interested, Boris, in what you said about local and regional authorities, because as someone who travels, and all of you do, I'm sure, in the Global South, I see that there too, the voices of citizens, the voices of civil society actors are driving change. It's not just coming from the top, it's coming from the people, from the men, women, children, civil society actors on the ground. That's where the change is coming from. And we can see it today as we look at the protests on Gaza that are taking place across the Global South as well. So thank you very much indeed, Boris, for outlining these different paradigms for us. Let's now turn to the political parties, or their representatives here, and see what responses you have. So I'm going to turn to you first from the Green Group, Marie-Alex, to give us an idea of what you see, the accomplishments the last 5 years, and what you see as the challenges perhaps coming up.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. And I'm going to start to share a concern about this shift, and then I'm happy to exchange with you to see what we can do together and to include more the local actors. So we are very concerned by this shift, and we can see it with the Global Gateway instrument. We are concerned first about the huge vagueness and what will be the impact on the financial structure. Is it not clear, because then it will be like an extra resource, but we heard from the European Auditors Court that it's difficult to do extra sources from blending instrument. Then we are scared that we can rebrand some envelope under NDK to the Global Gateway. And this we are very alert, because what we see as a big shift with the Global Gateway is like clearly the EU is focusing first on its geopolitical interest. Is it okay when we see the context? We can understand, but not to take the resource for development aid. This is a big point, like to make sure there is a clear frontier. Another point with this shift and this way of working from the EU with its external action, it's also the lack of transparency that we can see. Like, it's not clear how it will be the governance of this financial resources. Also, we are scared about that we are losing this spirit of equal food partnership. Like, clearly when we see the name Team Europe, then it's the Team Europe who's going to decide, and it's not a discussion with the partner countries. And also at the Greens, here we are super concerned about this idea to really rely on the private sector. Because then when we are asking what is the objective, is it the objective to reach our SDGs, to help the people who need more development budget, or is it the European companies? Then we're going to monitor this very closely. Also, another problematic that we can see, it's what we can see also under NDC, it's this idea of conditionality of development aid for migration project. This is something that we're going to follow closely because for us it's problematic ethically, but also in terms of effectiveness. It won't help the people who need it more aid. We have also very observed that these projects are violating human rights with arbitrary detention, not respecting refugees' law. So we're going to be monitoring this very closely. What we need first is to make sure to tailor the funding for our partners and to make sure not to leave no one behind is the first principle, and not to forget that we have this Agenda 2030 and that we still to be on track to reach the SDGs. We would like also to remind the target of 0.7%. That could be a very good source for public funding. And then in the short term for NDC, we will have this midterm review at the end of the year. Our first objective will be to keep what we have decided at the beginning of the instrument and not to change all the target. Also, we will push for the next funding of NDC in 2028-2034 to increase the NDC in the future. And also in this instrument to make sure to include more the civil society and local actors. It's missing a lot and we're going to push for that. And also to have more the inclusion and exchange with the non-EU actors. So this is our remarks about the context. I will be happy to exchange and also to come back on the question of how we are working to push for more inclusion of local actors.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Harry-Rex. I'll use that as a second point to come back to the panel, how all of you, first your reactions to the paradigm shifts taking place, and then second round to see how you are working and will enhance the role of the local actors. So thank you very much. I think what you've said is so important. You've pointed out to the migration and the violation of human rights, which we see every day in our headlines, bringing up the question of the SDGs. I think sometimes we tend to ignore that, but 2030 is literally around the corner. And what you've said also about Team Europe being something that sort of operates out of the institutional framework, and therefore accountability is less possible, if you like. Okay, thank you so much. So Silvia Gonzalez, if I could turn to you to get your points.
Good morning, everyone. I'll take the opportunity to speak in Spanish since there's interpretation. Bueno, lo que voy a decir no va a ser muy diferente de lo que ha dicho Magalix. Creo que en la Comisión de Desarrollo en el Parlamento tenemos la ventaja, o para algunos la desventaja, de que tenemos posiciones bastante alineadas, evidentemente, con ciertas diferencias políticas en ciertos enfoques y demás, pero creo que la mayoría, al menos de los grandes grupos políticos, coincidimos en las grandes líneas. Creo que no es necesario decir que estamos todos de acuerdo, yo estoy de acuerdo, mi grupo está de acuerdo en que hay un cambio de paradigma y que la política de cooperación al desarrollo es claramente víctima de esa tendencia. Creo que en los últimos 5 años nos hemos dado cuenta clarísimamente que cada vez más la agenda de cooperación al desarrollo se dirige a preocupaciones focalizadas sobre todo en temas de seguridad y migración, si es que no entra migración considerada también como una amenaza a la seguridad, cosa que también es bastante discutible, al menos por nuestra parte. Y bueno, hemos constatado en los últimos 5 años una clara tendencia en el cambio, un claro cambio en la manera de actuar de la Comisión, que pasa por el cambio incluso en el nombre de DG INPA, y ahora hablamos de partenariado, que puede tener un elemento, creo que justificado, en el sentido de intentar plasmar más una igualdad entre los actores, pero también nosotros en su momento fuimos algo crítico porque tenía una clara connotación, desde nuestro punto de vista, también más comercial, y creo que eso se ha ido concretizando con los años. Como María Luisa ha mencionado, en Dichi fue considerado, y lo consideramos como un triunfo en el sentido de fusionar mejor tanto todas las políticas de acción exterior. Hay más rapidez en la respuesta, puede haber más eficacia, más eficiencia, pero es verdad que vemos una creciente tendencia de la presencia de intereses geopolíticos en la acción de la cooperación al desarrollo, y cada vez es más difícil poner freno a ello. En los primeros años de la antigua legislatura nos enfrentábamos a los trust funds, que los verdes también fueron muy críticos con ellos. Era una manera de introducir dinero relacionado directa o indirectamente con la política del desarrollo, pero en el que la transparencia de ese uso no estaba nada presente. La Corte fue bastante dura con esos trust funds, o al menos con algunos de ellos, y pasamos del trust fund a encontrarnos ahora con el Global Gateway, que sufre de las mismas carencias desde el punto de vista, al menos, de legitimidad democrática, desde el punto de vista de nuestro grupo.
I think you need to turn your microphone on. Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. No, it wasn't you. It wasn't your fault.
No hay transparencia en la manera en que los proyectos son seleccionados en el contexto de Global Gateway, falta de participación parlamentaria, etcétera, etcétera. Con lo cual nos quitamos de encima los trust funds, pero nos encontramos en la misma situación con Global Gateway, que además tiene bastante más protagonismo con respecto a los trust funds. Se ha convertido, digamos, en la bandera de la política de cooperación al desarrollo, teniendo un instrumento completamente nuevo como es el DICHI, recientemente aprobado. Y Global Gateway acoge todo tipo de acciones que están más allá de lo que nosotros consideramos muchas veces como claramente cooperación al desarrollo. Entendemos y aceptamos que hay, como se ha dicho, un cambio de paradigma, que los intereses geopolíticos estarán y están cada vez más presentes en la cooperación al desarrollo, pero todo lo que implique directa o indirecta, al menos directamente cooperación al desarrollo, creemos que tiene que seguir cumpliendo ciertas premisas que son las establecidas por el tratado, y es que la cooperación al desarrollo tiene que partir del objetivo básico, que es la erradicación de la pobreza y reducción de inequidades. Muchas de las actividades que vemos hoy en día que se llevan a cabo, sobre todo a través de Global Gateway, no parecen al menos tener eso como prioridad en absoluto. Y es ahí donde nos encontramos un poco en una situación bastante incómoda en nuestra comisión, en la que vemos que la política de cooperación al desarrollo se va extendiendo, se convierte en una especie de instrumento que cubre otros intereses que van más allá de la propia política. Para nosotros es muy positivo y sigue siendo muy positivo que en DICI y en DICHI dé un fuerte protagonismo a los ODA, a la ayuda al desarrollo oficial, pero está claro que no es la prioridad hoy en día de la Comisión Europea como instrumento para facilitar la cooperación al desarrollo. Entonces, ahí nos encontramos en un dilema sobre cómo actuar ante esta nueva realidad, que es una realidad imparable, en el que creo que vamos a tener que ceder necesariamente parte de la manera de actuar de la cooperación al desarrollo sin intentar que los objetivos de base se desvanezcan.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. So, Justina, let's hear from you.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to this event. It's an honor to be here. Already a lot of things were said by my colleagues, and I think it's kind of symbolic that 3 of our groups are here because most of the time, at least in the Development Committee, which is a very special committee, in terms of this specific balance between values and economic interest, because in the Development Committee, let's say my group, Renew Group, Liberal Group, is sometimes, I will be brave to say, is more leftish than rightish, even though we have different opinions within our group. So it's quite symbolic that three of us, we are here because most of the time it's three of us that does a difference in development committee when it comes about deciding on the reports, on the positions. And we build that strong side which actually fights for this, let's say, more traditional development approaches. And the question of this balance, between economic interests and the older development, the primordial development goals is not new. And it's like, as far as I remember, the last 10 years, we were always struggling. There was always a question at the beginning of each mandate, whether the development committee is needed at all, whether we should be merged with AFET, whether... so you can see this tendency also a little bit, well, of course, this is a bit internal kitchen, but when we were deciding on this new instrument, there was a huge battle as well, like priorities and our rapporteurs from our group, from SND and from Renew, they really fought hard to have at least, I don't remember now, 90-something% of funds in DGP DACable. So it's a question of the migration. So just to ensure you that I cannot say what will be in the new parliament. It's a bit scary because we have so many of these new people coming from the far right. And even within the group, I mean, it's less probably problematic for the Greens and SND, but like for the Liberals, you can have like national delegations that go more to the right or more to the left. So it will be interesting to see how we keep this balance within the committee. I'm happy that we have some heavyweighters coming back, the ones that really understands the essence of development policy. But that fight will not be easy. We had this before, and even between the members in the same group. Until now, like within our group, in a liberal group, we managed to kind of maintain the very strong importance on the goals like SDGs. We were one of the last to present the report on the implementation of SDGs. Also, policy coherence for development, like continue asking national governments to honor their promises on 0.7 of the DNA to the development. We also found it actually, I think it was immediately after the pandemic that we got this Global Gateway Initiative coming, but it was kind of a big elephant in the room for everyone, even for our members. Exactly as a colleague said, the lack of transparency, and it was absolutely unclear. Is it something new? Are there some new money coming? Because it looked colossal, the money colossal. And yes, we had kind of a struggle at the beginning, and there was even some confrontation with the Commission trying to understand what it is, to the point that we understood that basically there is nothing really new. There are a lot of things that are ongoing already, just with a different branding. Okay, fine. We have to be innovative. Okay, fine. Also for trying to attract more private sector. Like in our group, we are not against this because we understand that there is such a lack of funding for the development policies that probably we need to look for other sources. But like for us, it was also important to keep this balance and to make sure that the main goals doesn't shift, which is a tendency when we look at the global gateway. So we will try with the members that understand the development profile and they're coming back. We will try to defend those values and to make sure that human rights and democracy, good governance, and sustainability, SDGs, and planet people first approach, like we maintain them at the core of development policies. Right. But it will not be easy. Yeah, and just to say probably also that we do have this. So first of all, let's see what members we have. And then just also to assure you that when it comes to the civil society role, this is one of the points that, especially with the Socialists and Greens, we were always trying to make sure that in our amendments, we have this in, that when we are negotiating on the compromise amendments, that we have it in. So we are there with you, I think, on that point. And now we will have the hearings of the new incoming commissioners, and I'm pretty sure that this is a good moment also. The moment we know our MEPs, it's a good point to brief them well also, like what priorities we want to stress for the new incoming commissioners. We will have the hearings with them, so there is the moment where you can use your leverage, like, and make sure that get those promises. And also we have every year under NDC regulation, we have this twice a year higher political level dialogue, which was a new animal at the beginning also, like what is it, how we eat it, like what we should achieve during them. But now we're trying to understand more and more what leverage as a parliament we have there as well. So it's a good moment not only to look at how the instrument was used until now, but also to give a good direction for the Commission and kind of to insist what we want as a parliament in terms of the thematics, in terms of the regions, in terms of the funds. So, yeah, I think the Parliament is a good place for cooperation for the organization like yours. I think we're one of the most open institutions from the European institutions, and we're easy to access, and your organization is strong, well-rooted. You know how the Parliament works, and please continue to lobby us. We're there for you.
Thank you. Thank you to all three of you for being very frank and honest about the challenges ahead and how your different political groups will tackle them. Some of it is quite, I have to say, reassuring, I'm sure, for all of us. And let's hear now from the Platforma's elected representatives and members for their assessment of the current situation. You've been here since the morning listening to all the different challenges we face now, including in the EU development assistance sector. And I'm going to turn first to Renske. Renske, your country is going through, let's say, some rather sensational political developments, a lot of turmoil, including, I think, with the new development minister, who's a personality of certain reputation, if I may put it in a modest way. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And indeed, that was something that I wanted to share with you, because indeed we have seen an immense increase of the populist parties in the Netherlands. And actually our new government will be presented on the 2nd of July, so almost. And we've indeed heard that our Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Aid, so it is changing from development cooperation, which is of course a term more in terms of equality, in terms of development cooperation in the longer term, it's going to shift to development aid. So that for me is quite a setback, only in terms of wording already. We also will see a 20% cut in the ministries, all ministries, but that will also be the case for our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is actually the largest ministry in the Netherlands, because also all the embassies fall under that ministry. So the largest cut in terms of civil servants will be there, 20%. So that's really a big cut. So I can only explain that to make sure that you understand how also at the ministry level, our dialogue with the ministry, they are somewhat scared to see how this will all turn out. There will be a budget cut of ODA of 50%. So this is really something huge. And there will be indeed a focus of shift in terms of more attention for trade. We foresee less attention for CSOs, less or more focus on easy countries, less on fragile states, less attention for the poor, less attention for inequality. So we, well, as I said, it's not really something to be very looking forward to. There will be an increased focus on food security, water, migration, so all the topics that are already important for the new government, they will export that also to the external policy. And I think that if you compare that with the developments that we now are seeing in the European Union, the reality will be that on both sides there will be less funding. So if one is looking to the other for teaming up, but if you in the end have more challenges but less money, then of course that is the situation that we are facing. And the paradox, I think, is already something that was mentioned by Boris, is that we see the huge problems from climate, conflict, migration. There's a lot of global challenges. They're only getting worse and more urgent, and we are looking inwards. We're only looking at ourselves, and from a kind of nostalgic perspective of wanting to going back to something that is no longer there. So we, as an association of Netherlands municipalities, we are sometimes also a little bit a different animal within the Platforma family, because we implement our development cooperation projects on behalf of Dutch municipalities, but only with a small financing from our Dutch municipalities. So 50% of our budget comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the rest comes from the EU, the World Bank, or USAID. So 50% is quite a lot. So we will need to really rethink our strategy. How are we going to deal with this situation? And I think that there are three elements that we will be looking into. So the first one is show. We really have to show what we're doing, what our impact is on the ground. I think we're very busy with our work, but sometimes we forget to communicate about it. And I also think we really need to show that the way that we are supporting, we are supporting an existing level of government that has tasks, that has responsibilities, that need to be strengthened in order to be able to play its role. I think particularly in the whole discussion around localizing, when there's a lot of focus on the need to localize to the country level, I think we can only truly localize if we not only localize at the level of civil society organizations, but also at the level of the local governments. They need to be able to play their role. And I think we need, so apart from showing, we also will need to adapt. We will need to adapt to the new priorities. We need, we can, of course, be very sad about certain developments, but we will also need to adapt and to deal with the new realities. So how are we going to adapt to these new priorities, the shift towards trade? How are we going to make sure that we can show that by creating an enabling environment at the local level, there's more perspective for businesses, both from our own countries, but also from the partner countries themselves? If there is no reliable local government, if there is no civil registry, if there is no land registration, there will not be a true ground for development. And I think that is the kind of argumentation that we will need to further use. We will also need to look in terms of how are we going to make the combination of capacity development with the hardware, with the infrastructure. How are we going to find our niche within the global gateway? How are we going to convince also the European Parliament about the need to not only focus on the hardware and the investments, but also to accompany that process with an accompaniment of support to local government structures and other partners. And I think the third part, the third element in the strategy will be to partner. So we, as I said, we may not like certain developments, but it's a reality. So how are we going to partner with our central government, with the European Union? How are we going to show them that we are a level of government just as they are? And how are we going to strengthen that cooperation? We are perhaps a different animal than the civil society organizations in that way, and perhaps it can also be a strength. So let us see how we can really build on that specificity. And then within Europe, I think we also, as Platforma members, will need to find each other and to also see together how we're going to confront this, how we're going to reshape our narrative, and how we can do that together through these type of meetings and outside of them. So we don't know what will happen, but let at least not become too negative about it, because I think we need to face forward and look for new opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Renske. It's quite a cautionary tale about what can happen when the far right actually gets into power. though we live in democracy, so let's see how long that lasts as well. Let me turn now to our Platforma members here, national associations, and I think in the room I have Juan Antonio García Mayor, who would perhaps like to come in for a short while. I have 20 minutes and quite a few interventions, so if you could please keep it short, be very welcome. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Muy bien. Bueno, pues buenos días a todos. Un saludo muy afectuoso de parte del Fondo Andaluz de FANSI a todos los miembros de Plataforma y, por supuesto, al elenco que se encuentra en la mesa. Escuchando todas las intervenciones, desde FANSI tenemos que decir lo siguiente. Estamos muy preocupados porque veníamos demandando desde hace ya tiempo, orgullosos de la labor que hacemos del desarrollo, cooperación al desarrollo de forma descentralizada, queremos más autonomía y que se nos tuviera más en cuenta para que pudiéramos realizar mejor la tarea que llevamos haciendo en los distintos países, en África, en Latinoamérica, en el este de Europa, y nos encontramos que ahora tenemos un problema mayor, y es que no sabemos, con toda la ultraderecha que acaba de entrar en Europa, realmente qué es lo que va a ocurrir de la nueva Comisión y del nuevo Parlamento que salga, ¿no? ¿Se va a mantener realmente lo que teníamos? ¿Vamos a ir a menos? ¿O vamos a ir a más? Entonces, desde FANSI estamos muy preocupados porque lo que queremos es que se siga llevando a cabo la cooperación al desarrollo de forma descentralizada, que es como entendemos que se puede sacar el máximo provecho, más eficacia y eficiencia con los gobiernos locales y, por supuesto, cumpliendo pues lo que lleva la democracia, la justicia social y llevando pues todos los valores que eso conlleva a los países más necesitados, ¿no? Cumpliendo con la Agenda 2030, cumpliendo con el Pacto Verde, en definitivamente con todo lo que queremos. Pero a la vez también desde los gobiernos locales, y hablo ya como alcalde, con todos los retos y todas las preocupaciones que vemos, pues nos preocupa mucho que hasta ahora en Europa no se haya hecho una política quizás más cercana hacia los gobiernos locales, que se pueda entender un poco mejor, con más ejemplos, con más pedagogía, con más inversiones y con más herramientas que podamos tener los distintos ayuntamientos, los gobiernos locales, más facilidad para poder explicar a los ciudadanos pues lo bueno que se está haciendo en Europa, para qué sirve Europa y que cuando lleguen unas elecciones pues no tengamos la altísima abstención que hemos tenido, que ese es uno de los principales problemas que a nuestro juicio, por lo menos a mi juicio, valoro y veo. Los populistas, los euroscépticos, los negacionistas, al final tienen un mensaje que cala muy bien en la sociedad y que es lo que hace ver que realmente Europa está lejana, que Europa pues no tiene impacto en nuestra vida, en la calidad de vida y que tenemos cada uno de los vecinos en nuestras ciudades, en nuestros pueblos, en nuestros municipios. Las 3 transiciones que son necesarias y que todos los gobiernos están intentando de explicar a través de la Agenda 2030, como es la digital, la ecológica y la energética, cuesta mucho trabajo de explicar a sectores productivos que en algunos casos lo ven como una amenaza, como por ejemplo puede ser el sector agrícola. Y sin embargo los populistas pues esto lo venden pues con algo de que hay que ir en contra de esta agenda que lo que hace es perjudicar a estos sectores productivos. Entonces yo creo que tenemos que repensar muy bien. Primero,
señor, por favor, puedes terminar. Sí.
Repensar muy bien primero cómo explicamos todo lo que hacemos y intentar de buscar una estrategia que siga manteniendo lo que tenemos y lo mejore. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Let's turn now to Nino Rukadze. He's National Association of Local Authorities of Georgia, and I'm calling out a few names, of course, that have been given to me and people who've shown interest. But really, if you want to come in and your name is not on my list, please just put up your hand and I will give you the floor. But for the moment, let me turn to Nino Rukadze.
Thank you very much. Well, very tough questions have been addressed during this panel, and what make these questions even harder and tougher is that these are not theoretical questions. These are the questions which Europe has to answer and has to answer now. And the response that Europe will give to these questions will have enormous impact, not only in the continent, but in the globe. So, these questions, honestly, I don't have answers to those questions. And these questions do not raise any answers, but on the contrary, they raise some counter questions. And one of the counter questions that I have is that, can Europe, well, no doubts about the fact that economy has always been the pillar of the European power, and it always has been the instrument for European influence. But at the same time, we have to ask ourselves the question, can Europe afford to compromise, or even worse, abandon the values, the ideals that it has? Because we have to be conscious about the fact that European values, European principles are the greatest force of attraction. And these ideals, they mobilize strategic partners around Europe. So I believe that Europe cannot lead politically, cannot lead economically, unless it leads morally as well. So besides, I think that decoupling economic interests from values, from ideals, I think this is fraught with existential and also identity crisis in Europe, which I think will not help to shore up the geopolitical and geoeconomic stance of Europe. Also, it is very important that Europe has always been branded not only as not only for its values, but also for the opportunities that it provides. I come from a country where Europe is seen, is perceived as an ideal of opportunities. And I think that Europe should promote creating those opportunities. Europe should sustain this brand, the brand of opportunities, and it should create these opportunities. And I think that the best places that Europe can create those opportunities are the local territories. And I think that
I'd have to ask you to wrap up as well, please. We're short of time.
And to wrap it up, I would like to say that I believe that there are no more effective vehicles for implementing and executing those opportunities than the decentralized cooperation. So I think this is something that should be a very important part of the decentralized cooperation should be a very important part of the development cooperation. This is something that EU should invest in and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Turning now to Violeta Crudo. Yeah.
Thank you. What we need from the European colleagues. The European Parliament and its members can act as better allies to local authorities involved in development cooperation through various means. 1. Promoting partnership and direct funding. 2. Active consultation and involvement. The next. Support for local initiatives. Advocacy and lobbying. Education and awareness. Monitoring and evaluation. And the last one. Facilitating multi-level dialogue and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, I have also on my list Yoya Aloseba, General Director of DG Cooperación from Spain as well, Catalonia. Yes.
Yeah, hello, good morning. Thank you for this space. I'm just going to shift to Spanish now. Voy a ir directa a los puntos por la brevedad. El panorama no es muy optimista, todos lo compartimos, pero esto genera oportunidades para todos nosotros, para las local authorities, las autoridades locales, regionales, locales, municipales, y lo tenemos que ver como una oportunidad de trabajar en alianzas, en un mundo donde el multilateralismo está pasado de moda, pero ir todos juntos y aprovechar oportunidades en términos de cambiar el relato de voy a ir pidiendo a Europa siempre financiamiento y dinero hacia un relato de quiero ocupar esos espacios donde la policy se está debatiendo y se está discutiendo. Es decir, creo que la Global Gateway y los diferentes Team Europe, wherever spaces que se están creando a nivel de países de ayuda oficial al desarrollo, pues tendríamos que tener una presencia como local authorities para poder influir y cambiar determinados posicionamientos, para poder hacer oír nuestra voz. Es decir, salir de esta zona de confort que estamos ocupando, y ya termino, de ir pidiendo siempre financiamiento a ir incidiendo e influyendo en la policy. Renske lo comentaba. Sabemos muy mal vender nuestras actuaciones, nuestros proyectos. Tenemos que aprender a hacer un poco de marketing y saber vender cómo, cuando inciden las local authorities en determinadas regiones, el impacto es en positivo. Y esto lo sabemos, no lo hemos aprendido. Lo damos por hecho. Por tanto, aprender un poquito. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Juris Zilko, Mayor of Kakava from Latvia.
Okay, hello. It's my pleasure to be here, dear panelists and members of Platforma. So I would like to point out 3 political notes and 2 practical notes. First, I would like to stress that local and regional authorities is as a precious resource whose role in the development cooperation is often underappreciated. Secondly, however, it should be stressed that local and regional authorities are the ones best positioned to mutually reinforce the capacities of their development cooperation partner municipalities and meeting the territorial challenges, at the same time fostering their own sustainable development. Third point. Likewise, in order to obtain the best results, the development cooperation policy must not only be implemented together through the multi-stakeholder approach, but also discussed and planned together at all levels, local, regional, and international. And now going to 2 practical points about cooperation in development area. So, as I'm representing a local municipality of Tjakov from Latvia, our municipality have experience in cooperation with a small town Novi Belos in Ukraine. And I would like to stress the importance of starting this cooperation in the framework of the project Bridges of Trust, which has given the structure and initial funding for this cooperation, as well as the future opportunities to be involved in the reconstruction process of Novi Belos. And last point from me, we are going actually next week to deliver a minivan and humanitarian aid, as well as to learn from their best practices in the area of civil defense, and last but not least, to elaborate together our common activities for the reconstruction Ukraine and particularly the city of Novi Belos. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lady, you put up your hand, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Elizabeth Jonell. I'm from Salar, Sweden. And I just want to make some comments. I think it's so important that we keep on working on the local level and collaboration on the local level, because that's the only way to strengthen democracy, strengthen gender equality, and to strengthen human rights. And it's on the local level, and it's collaboration between the local levels that we can make the changes. And the changes, it goes 2 ways. We always talk about how we help or we do, but it goes both ways. When we collaborate, we see and we get help, and we can find things that we can do on the local levels in our cities. So I think that's one of the important things. And in Sweden, we don't have the possibility to finance collaboration with the local money that we get locally. We have to have the government with us. But we still have the possibility, and we do a lot of collaboration, and we can see that it gives us a lot back also. And I think that's the only way to make changes in the world, that we keep it on and don't give up. And together we have to show the good examples and to show how we can keep the collaboration and don't give up.
Yes, the struggle continues, as we say, la lucha continuar. Okay, I saw another hand go up. There's somebody else wants to, yes, please, to come in.
Just briefly, I still have the feeling I miss the urgent. Are we not at the Titanic? And I mean, Europe is on the Titanic. The world, the global south, is changing a lot, and we still speak the same language. At the same time, one of the few organizations who cover all local authorities is the World Organization of Local Authorities. There are still the Russians, the Chinese. Maybe we should make better use of that. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. I think those are wise words to end what has been quite a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for all your insights. Justina did point out the ways that local authorities can engage with the new parliament, with the institutions, so I don't feel the need to come back to you unless you have something very urgent that you would like to add. Okay, so I won't really wrap up what's been a very important, I think, conversation, but I do share, sir, this was what I was thinking this morning as I was talking and facilitating the first conversation. We don't have a sense of crisis. We do not have this sense of urgency that you have referred to. And I wonder why that is. And it's something that I'm going to certainly be exploring in my own research and conversations in my own writings. Why don't we feel that way? Because I think we are lucky. We live in a very, very, despite all the tensions around us, despite the 2 wars in our neighborhood, 2 devastating wars in our neighborhood, 1 plausible genocide in our neighborhood, we do not feel the impact in our daily lives. We still go about our ways and our life and our work and our children as though we are sheltered. Let's just put it in. We're very blessed to be sheltered, but we need to connect. And I think, Boris, one of the ways that we do connect with this very volatile world that you talked about is through our development cooperation, is through our external action. And I think if that comes under attack from the forces of regression, not progress, but regression, then we are in real danger of losing the real battle of narratives, which is the 21st century, belongs to all of us. Because we are in uncharted territory, and one of the things we haven't talked about, but is going to be a huge conversation with the Global South, is the issue of decolonizing aid, decolonizing humanitarian aid. And at the time when Renske has pointed out to us what is happening in the Netherlands, which I think is a chilling cautionary tale of what can actually happen when the far right gets into portfolios of this kind, which are so essential to our well-being, cutting aid, cutting the number of civil servants, and taking a very Eurocentric view of the world, is that we really lose that connection. And I think if Europe loses that connection with the rest of the world, that comes through not just Global Gateway and Team Europe, but through our values, which across the world are still inspiring, if we practice what we preach. For me, that is the essential of Europe's future, is we apply at home what we preach abroad. If we do the same things in the sector of migration, continuing, etc., we are losing that battle of narratives, not just because of disinformation, but because of the reality of what we are. But once again, I want to end on a note of hope, and I think the hope does come from us, the people, local authorities, regional authorities, cities, municipalities, all of us. And that's why I think you are well advised and well positioned to talk to your new MEPs about the need exactly the need to conversations to continue and ideas to be taken from the local authorities and regional governments and from platforms such as PLATFORMA. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank the organizers. Boris, thank you very much, Shahida. And I'll leave you the floor for the housekeeping rules. Let's first give a round of applause to our panelists and to ourselves.
Thank you very much indeed. So again, service announcement. We have a slight change in the program for this afternoon's Political Council. So we have been moved a room. So we will be on the 6th floor. However, what we will do is that after lunch, we ask that we all meet in front of this room so that we can escort you all up to the Political Council room all together. So that's the first one. And then the second one is that there will be a group picture, also with CMR colleagues who are about to finish their session in about 2 or 3 minutes. So please stick around so that then we can go into the auditorium, I believe, which is right next door, to take a photo together, and then off to lunch. So thank you very much indeed, and have a good lunch, everyone.